So the NFL just announced that they're canceling the preseason. Now, let me be clear on what this means. This doesn't mean that training camp and the practices are canceled. It just means that the preseason games itself is canceled. And with that rather vague announcement, there are a ton of questions about what does this mean for the regular season. Should fans be concerned about the prospects of there being a season, or should they not? And also, what does this mean for the Cleveland Browns? Well, let's talk about it. Real quick before this video starts, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. The football season is planning to start pretty soon here. I know there's going to be no preseason, but there's still going to be a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to cover. So make sure you're locked in, subscribed, and notified so you don't miss on a single thing. Now back to the video. So 2020 continues to be the wild ride that it has been since the start of the year. And this is no different as we roll into what we hope is football season. And the first thing we have to ask when we bring up football season is, well, will there be a football season? And if you asked me this last week, and I think somebody did ask me on Q&A last week, I was a lot less optimistic about the prospects of a season. I thought it was ultimately more likely to happen than not likely, but I thought the percentages of not likely jumped up in the last few weeks. But let's talk about what's happened and see if I've changed on that position, because at that time there was no talk between the NFL and the NFLPA. There was a ton of ground to cover before camp started with very little time, and it seemed like they had no safety protocols into place to make sure this season can happen smoothly. Because I will stress this, the one thing that makes the NFL much different than the NBA or even baseball is once you start playing football, there is no stopping and restarting. The damage that football does to your body, once you allow people to have a month or 2 months off of playing football, there's no working that back in a timely manner by having a few practices. It's just going to have to be gone, or else it's just going to be incredibly unsafe for a sport that's already designed not to be specifically really safe. So I don't think the NFL is the type of league in sport that can quite honestly survive starting, having half the season, shutting down for like a month or two, and then coming back. I don't think that's how that's going to work with the NFL. If the NFL is going to have this season and they're going to play all the way through, it has to be all the way straight through. I don't think they can postpone, because football, that's just a cruel thing to ask of a football player, to have their body get used to not being hit week after week for a month or two and then get right to it. That's just not going to be safe at the end of the day, on top of already being at risk with everything else going on. So with that in mind, this is why I'm concerned about the lack of safety protocols put in place, because one large outbreak within the NFL can shut this whole thing down, and NFL cannot afford to have that happen. So now that there seems to be some safety protocols in place, they canceled the preseason, which I think is ultimately going to be a good move when it comes to the context of this making sure that you can have a season. One, because this gives the NFL some time to figure out what they're going to do with the regular season to make sure that they don't have an outbreak that can shut down this season within the league. Again, since teams aren't going to be traveling to play one another and playing each other physically, just inherently off of that, you take out a significant amount of the risk, which is the interaction between teams that can accelerate the spread. So I think that's very smart, because to be honest, the preseason games, while they do serve some importance, I don't want to downplay them completely. They are the first thing that can go in terms of everything that you might have to give up and sacrifice in order to just play the regular season in 2020. This also gives the league some flexibility. They can figure things out. If they need to delay the season 2 to 4 weeks in order to, one, make up for lost time because of no off-season workouts in person, and two, to make up some time to be able to figure out what they're going to do. Like, let's say, for example, if the NFL moves to having each team operate their own individual team bubble and having like guest protocols in place for when teams visit other teams in order to make sure that there's no outbreaks. That's going to be something that's going to take about 2 to 4 weeks to set up. And then you can also allow teams to get 2 to 4 weeks of extra practice time to make up for lost time that they had in the offseason. So all of that together in the last few days makes me more optimistic about the direction this is going. This feels like the right direction from both the NFLPA and the NFL. It seems like both sides want to make sure that there is a season. They just have to come to terms on how that's going to be done safely, which if they can reach there, and I see no reason why the owners can't make sure that they can put in some safety protocols with all the things that every other league has have to sacrifice in order to play. I don't think that this should be something that you have to pull the owner's hair on. If it is, then we're in some trouble, but I don't anticipate that being the case. So that being said, this is going in a much better direction, in a much more confident direction, and I'm much more confident this week, speaking right now, than I was a week ago about the prospects of there being a season. So that is the good news. Now, are there some downsides to this? Yes. If you're a team that has a ton of position battles, the elimination of preseason games is a lot more crucial to you than it is for other teams, because preseason games are where you can figure out these position battles with a little bit more clarity. Now you're kind of left up to camp battles without the preseason game. That's not going to be great. If you're a team with a quarterback controversy also, that's not good. So mainly for teams with a lot of position battles are going to be affected by the lack of preseason games. And then I hear a lot being said about the bubble guys. Let's wait and see how much they're going to be affected, because it seems like one of the precautions they're going to have to take in to have this season safely and to make sure that they don't run out of players during the season, if there is an outbreak of this disease within the NFL, is they're going to have to make sure there are extra players on the rosters. So I think they're going to have expanded rosters, at the very least expanded practice squads. And I think it's probably going to be a combination of both. So more guys are going to end up getting jobs here that are on the bubble if they do that. So the lack of preseason games, yes, it does affect them because they don't get to put out tape, but also they're probably more likely to be on an NFL team during the regular season than they would have in a regular year. So it kind of balances itself out in that respect. Now let's talk about how this specifically affects the Browns. Now, the Browns are in a interesting position here, right? Because on paper, you look at the Browns, you look at the new coaching staff, and you're like, well, they needed this offseason stuff, and they need the preseason games. And a part of me understands that, but I look at it a little bit differently, because quiet is kept. I think the Browns are actually one of the teams that can benefit the most if the NFL decides to delay the start of the regular season 2 to 4 weeks, because a 2 to 4 week delay will ensure that you get ample practice time with your two most important receivers, Odell and Jarvis, who, if camp comes back as scheduled, won't be able to practice until like week 2 of training camp, and you won't get both of them on the field at the same time practicing on full go probably till like the 3rd or 4th week. So it's a lot of lost time there already for these guys. So if there is a delay in the regular season, and if there are no preseason games, I think the Browns kind of benefit a little bit on the offensive side of the ball, because the Browns kind of know who's going to start at every single position. Offensive line is set. Maybe right guard, there's a little bit of a battle there, but you could throw Chris Hubbard there, a veteran, if you need to. So it's really not that dire of a battle, especially with the money you spent on the other positions on the line. Wide receiver set, running back is set, quarterback is set. There's not a lot of battles on this team. So when there's not a lot of battles on your roster, what you really need is reps with the ones. And preseason games kind of take away from the amount of reps you can get with the ones, because you have to prepare other guys to get out there on the field that won't necessarily play or make the team. And it kind of takes away from that time you can put in with the ones. And also in preseason games, you just don't get a ton of reps with the ones. So the Browns are going to benefit from being able to get a ton of reps with the core offense, which they need desperately. They need reps with Jarvis, Odell, and Baker Mayfield all out there, because they missed out on it last year. It looks like they're going to miss out on it this year if there is no delay. They need as many as those first team reps with those three as possible. Now, this is going to hurt the running game a little bit, and it's going to hurt the running game league-wide. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all goes. But it's going to be very hard for our offensive line to practice run blocking in a quarantine type situation. Let's be honest about it. There's going to be limited tackling. There's going to be limited banging down in the trenches. It's just going to be more difficult to prepare that part of the game, and that part of the game might struggle with all of these kind of restrictions around it. But quite honestly, I think Nick Chubb and the pieces you have on the offensive line are good enough to figure it out once they're able to play full go. I worry about Baker Mayfield, Jarvis, and Odell more than anything on that offense, because I know the potential that could be if it works. And the more reps they can get, the better. And since that's probably the least physical thing, right? Quarterback to wide receiver interactions, that's probably the least physical thing you could practice on the football field. It's going to be the one you're going to be able to get the best quality of reps in. So the Browns do benefit from that. And I do think getting those guys on the same page will ultimately be a little bit easier than it would be if this were a regular training camp scenario. Because again, we have no idea when Jarvis and Odell are going to be healthy enough to practice full go, full blow, like they normally would be able to if they were healthy. So that's actually kind of a good thing. But yeah, it's weird this year, right? 2020 continues to get weirder and weirder. There is going to be no preseason in the NFL, no preseason games, no preseason warm-ups, none of that. And I'm going to be interested to see what teams do to make up for that. Are we just going to see a ton of scrimmages? Are they going to televise these things? A lot of questions need to be answered that just aren't out there, and I'm kind of disappointed, quite frankly, in the NFL's sloppiness in this area. It just really seems like they're improvising at this point, but at least they're improvising in the right direction. But that's what I think, how the lack of a preseason is going to affect the NFL regular season as far as it goes with the Browns and around the league. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think the loss of preseason will be a big deal, or do you think it won't? Let me know your thoughts. But again, guys, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. And again, guys, have a great day and have a good night.